Welcome back to the Rock Vault, where the amps are always hot. Today, we're cranking the clock back to the 1960s, when distortion was dangerous, riffs were rebellion, and 15 groundbreaking tracks lit the fuse that gave birth to hard rock's roaring, untamed spirit. When the Stones walked into RCA Studios in Hollywood in the summer of '65, they weren't aiming to rewrite rock history, but that's exactly what happened. The song began as a near-acoustic number, but when Keith Richards plugged his guitar through a fuzzbox, the sound transformed into something raw, urgent, and impossible to ignore. That riff didn't just introduce distortion to the masses, it announced a new era where rock could be as gritty and confrontational as it wanted to be. Mick Jagger's vocal sneer cut through the airwaves like a rebel yell, pairing perfectly with Charlie Watts' relentless backbeat. It was a middle finger to polished pop, a warning shot to the safe, clean sound dominating radio at the time. And yet, somehow, it was still irresistible. The kind of song you couldn't turn off, even if your parents told you to. For many, Satisfaction was a first taste of rebellion. Teenagers cranked it on transistor radios under the covers late at night, knowing the neighbors wouldn't approve. The buzzing guitar became a cultural rallying cry, embodying the restless energy of a generation in motion, one that wasn't afraid to question authority and wanted their music to reflect it. Richards once called it a rough demo, but the world knew better. It climbed to #1 in the US, etched its place in rock's DNA, and paved the way for every heavier, louder track that followed. Without that fuzz-drenched opening riff, hard rock's birth might have sounded very different. If there's a song that feels like the open road in sonic form, it's Born to Be Wild. Released in the summer of '68, it wasn't just a hit single, it was a manifesto for a new breed of rock, built on a muscular, chugging riff and John Kay's gravel-edged vocal. The track captured a sense of freedom that resonated far beyond the biker culture it's often associated with. Originally written as a slower, almost ballad-like tune, the song took on new life once Steppenwolf plugged in and pushed the tempo. The guitar tone had grit, the drums had weight, and the bass line locked in like a highway groove you could ride for miles. Its energy was lean, loud, and unrelenting. The kind of sound that didn't just fill the room, it filled your chest. It's here that the phrase heavy metal entered the rock lexicon, tucked casually into a lyric that became prophecy. While Born to Be Wild isn't heavy metal in the modern sense, its attitude, defiant, untamed, and high octane, laid groundwork for what hard rock would become in the decade ahead. For many, this track wasn't just a song, it was a soundtrack to adventure. Picture a summer night in '69, top down on a convertible, the wind rushing past, and that opening riff kicking in as the world blurs by. It was about more than travel. It was about escape, about finding your own road and refusing to slow down for anyone. The song's cultural explosion was cemented when it roared through the film Easy Rider, forever linking it to rebellion, counterculture, and the thrill of going where the map ends. On stage, it was just as electrifying, with the band driving it like a finely tuned engine running in the red. Born to Be Wild wasn't polished or polite, and that was its beauty. It gave permission to be loud, to be bold, and to live at full throttle. For hard rock, it was another crucial ignition point, one that made sure the engine never stopped. When Led Zeppelin unleashed Whole Lotta Love as the opening track of Led Zeppelin II, it hit like a thunderclap. Jimmy Page's opening riff was heavy, hypnotic, and instantly unforgettable. A snarling blues lick amplified into something massive enough to shake the walls. Robert Plant's raw, unrestrained vocals danced between seduction and roar, giving the track an almost dangerous edge. The song's middle section was pure sonic theater, swirling reverb, echoing moans, and bursts of guitar feedback creating a tension and release that was unlike anything on the radio in 1969. It wasn't just music. It was an experience, almost cinematic in scope. For fans hearing it for the first time, Whole Lotta Love was a revelation. It was the kind of track you blasted through giant floor speakers in a dimly lit basement, letting the low end rumble through your bones. It sounded dangerous, a little forbidden, exactly what rock and roll was meant to be. Charting high worldwide, the song became Zeppelin's signature in the US, and their live performances would stretch it into epic, extended jams that showcased the band's raw chemistry. It was proof that hard rock didn't have to be concise. It could be sprawling, intense, and completely immersive. Whole Lotta Love didn't just ride the wave of late 60s heaviness, it defined it. With one riff, Zeppelin announced they were more than a blues rock band. They were architects of the hard rock blueprint. Long before distortion pedals filled guitarists' pedal boards, the Kinks stumbled onto something revolutionary. You Really Got Me didn't just open with a riff, it exploded with one. Dave Davies' jagged, overdriven guitar tone was unlike anything on the charts in 1964. It sounded raw, almost broken, but it carried a punch that made the song impossible to ignore. The magic came from an act of pure experimentation. Frustrated with his amp's clean tone, Davies slashed the speaker cone with a razor blade and poked it with a pin, creating a fuzzy, torn edge sound that would inspire countless rock and punk bands. That gritty riff paired perfectly with Ray Davies' urgent vocal delivery, giving the track a reckless, youthful energy. For kids in the mid-60s, this was the moment rock shed its polite suit and tie. It was short, aggressive, and unapologetically loud. The kind of track you'd crank in your bedroom while your parents yelled from downstairs to turn it down. The simple power chord progression made it accessible, but the delivery gave it danger. You Really Got Me became the Kinks' breakthrough hit, topping the UK charts and breaking into the US market. More importantly, it laid a cornerstone for hard rock's DNA, proving that attitude and tone could matter as much as technical skill. Without that ripped-up amp in a small London studio, the sound of the late 60s might have been very different. When Purple Haze hit the airwaves in 1967, it didn't just stand out. It sounded like it had beamed in from another planet. Jimi Hendrix's guitar work was raw, otherworldly, and drenched in distortion, feedback, and effects that most listeners had never even imagined. That iconic opening chord was jagged and mysterious, pulling you into a sonic trip before you even realized what was happening. Recorded at London's Delane Lee Studios, the track showcased Hendrix's ability to fuse blues, psychedelia, and sheer volume into something brand new. Noel Redding's driving bass and Mitch Mitchell's explosive drumming gave it urgency. But it was Hendrix's tone, thick, saturated, and unpredictable. That made it a rallying cry for the harder edge of rock. For fans in the late 60s, Purple Haze was more than a song. It was a cultural lightning bolt. You could hear it spilling out of college dorm windows, smoky basement clubs, and VW vans crawling toward weekend festivals. It felt rebellious, wild, and just a little dangerous, perfectly matching the restless mood of the era. While its lyrics have been debated for decades, love song, drug reference, surreal dream, its musical impact is undeniable. Purple Haze shattered the clean, tidy boundaries of radio rock and pushed guitar playing into uncharted territory. The track didn't just influence the psychedelic movement. It planted a flag for hard rock, proving that volume, distortion, and fearlessness could be an art form in themselves. When The Who unleashed My Generation in 1965, it was like a Molotov cocktail lobbed into the polite world of pop. Roger Daltrey's stuttering delivery wasn't just a vocal quirk. It was a raw expression of frustration, urgency, and youthful defiance. The song's jagged energy and unfiltered attitude made it a direct challenge to authority. John Entwistle's distorted bass solo, one of the first in rock history, rumbled with an intensity that was unheard of on AM radio. Pete Townshend's slashing guitar chords had the precision of a blade, while Keith Moon's drumming was an untamed storm, crashing and tumbling without restraint. Together, they created a sound that felt both dangerous and unstoppable. For teenagers in the mid-60s, My Generation was more than music. It was a banner to rally under. You could feel its pulse in smoky London clubs, in crowded garages where local bands practiced too loud, and blasting from scooters roaring through the city streets. It was a song for anyone who'd ever been told to quiet down and decided to turn the volume up instead. Though it barely cracked the US charts, its cultural footprint was massive. My Generation helped redefine what a rock single could be: aggressive, unapologetic, and laced with the seeds of hard rock's defiant spirit. The Who weren't just playing notes, they were starting a movement. By early 1966, British rock was riding high, but Shapes of Things marked a turning point, a moment when the sound grew sharper, heavier, and more experimental. Built on a driving rhythm and Jeff Beck's fuzz-drenched guitar, the track delivered an urgency that pushed it far beyond the pop charts. Beck's lead work was fierce, yet melodic, bending and sustaining notes until they felt like they might rip through the speakers. The song carried a subtle darkness, its lyrics hinting at war, social change, and the uncertainty of the times. Unlike much of the tidy British invasion output, Shapes of Things had grit in its teeth. The drums hit with a punch, the bass rolled like an undercurrent, and Beck's solos turned feedback, once considered a mistake, into an expressive weapon. For listeners back then, this was the sound of rock breaking free from its clean-cut image. You could hear it on transistor radios in parks, spilling from record shop doorways, and blasting from the garages where teenagers were learning their first power chords. It felt modern, edgy, and a little dangerous, just enough to excite parents' disapproval. Shapes of Things didn't just top charts in the UK. It became a blueprint for the emerging psychedelic and hard rock scenes. In under 3 minutes, the Yardbirds bridged the gap between bluesy tradition and the uncharted heaviness that would soon define a new era of rock. Voodoo Child, Slight Return, wasn't crafted for radio. It was captured like lightning in a bottle. Recorded almost as a jam at New York's record plant, the track is Hendrix at his most untamed, bending notes until they screamed, coaxing feedback into melody, and making the guitar speak with a voice equal parts swagger and fury. The groove is thick and unshakable, anchored by Noel Redding's bass and Mitch Mitchell's fluid drumming. But it's Hendrix's command that steals the show. Every lick feels alive, shifting from precise stabs to molten waves of sound. Its blues roots cranked to their limit, transformed into something heavier and more dangerous than anything else in '68. For fans, hearing it for the first time was like watching a storm roll in. You could feel it before you fully understood it. It became the kind of track that stopped you mid-conversation in a smoky club, or had you leaning closer to your turntable, knowing you were hearing something historic. Live, Voodoo Child became a force of nature, often stretching past 10 minutes as Hendrix tore through improvisations that felt like battle cries. It wasn't just a performance, it was a declaration of what the electric guitar could do when rules were ignored. In the broader arc of rock history, Voodoo Child stands as one of the defining bridges between blues tradition and hard rock's explosive future. It didn't just push the genre forward, it blew the doors off entirely. By 1968, the Beatles had conquered pop, psychedelia, and everything in between. But Helter Skelter was something else entirely. Paul McCartney set out to create the loudest, rawest rock song possible. And what emerged was a chaotic, full-throttle assault that shocked even the most devoted Beatles fans. The guitars were overdriven and abrasive, played like they were on the edge of collapse. Ringo Starr's drumming pounded relentlessly, and McCartney's vocals tore through the mix with a hoarse, unhinged energy. It was rock stripped of its polish, replaced with sweat, distortion, and pure adrenaline. For kids hearing it on the White Album, Helter Skelter was a revelation. It proved that even the most sophisticated band in the world could still play it raw and dirty. It was the kind of track that made you want to crank your turntable until the needle rattled in the groove. The recording sessions were marathon affairs, with the band pushing themselves into exhaustion, stretching takes deep into the night. By the final fade-out, the song collapses into feedback and chaos, as if the studio itself couldn't contain the energy. In the evolution of hard rock, Helter Skelter is a landmark, showing that sheer volume, aggression, and recklessness could be as impactful as melody or harmony. It was the Beatles throwing out the rulebook, and in doing so, helping to write a new one for the rock decade ahead.
Don't you know that I'm loving you in a God.
When Iron Butterfly dropped In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida in 1968, they didn't just release a song, they unleashed a 17-minute epic that redefined what rock could be. The opening riff was simple, yet massive, a slow rolling wave of fuzzed-out guitar and organ that felt almost ceremonial, drawing listeners into a trance before the first verse even hit. The track sprawled across an entire side of the album, moving through hypnotic organ passages, gritty guitar solos, and a drum section that seemed to stretch time itself. It was heavy in a way rock hadn't been before. Not fast or frantic, but weighty, deliberate, and immersive. For fans in '68, hearing it was like entering another world. You might have first experienced it in a dimly lit room with incense burning, the record spinning as you sank deeper into the sound. It was a communal listen, something to be absorbed from start to finish, a journey rather than a single. Legend has it the title was a slurred attempt at saying, "in the Garden of Eden," but the accidental phrase stuck, adding to the song's mystique. Radio edits cut it down to under 3 minutes, but the full-length version became a badge of honor among rock fans, a statement that you understood the music on its own terms. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida wasn't just psychedelic. It was a heavy, lumbering blueprint for the kind of extended, powerful jams that would shape hard rock and even early metal. It proved that sometimes the heaviest impact comes not from speed, but from letting every note fully land. From the first dramatic organ strike and that unforgettable declaration, "I am the god of hellfire," Fire made it clear this wasn't going to be another polite rock single. Arthur Brown and his band blended theatrical flair with pounding rhythms, heavy organ lines, and vocals that veered between commanding shouts and manic wails. What made it groundbreaking wasn't just the sound, but the attitude. In an era where guitars were becoming the weapon of choice for heavy rock, Fire proved that raw power could come from unexpected places. Here, it was driven almost entirely by keyboards and Brown's towering voice. The result was dark, intense, and unlike anything else on the charts. For fans in 1968, this was more than a song. It was a performance. You could picture Brown on stage, face painted, eyes wide, wearing his infamous flaming helmet. It wasn't just music, it was spectacle, shock, and heavy rock swagger rolled into one. The track stormed to the top of the UK charts and even cracked the US top 10, proving that audiences were ready for something bolder and more theatrical. Its influence would echo through the decades, inspiring artists from Alice Cooper to Kiss to blend shock visuals with hard-hitting rock. Fire didn't just burn up the charts. It helped ignite the idea that hard rock could be as much about presence and personality as riffs and volume. And once you heard that opening line, you never forgot it. When King Crimson opened their debut album with 21st Century Schizoid Man, it was like a warning from the future. The track hit with jagged guitar stabs, distorted vocals that sounded like they were shouted through a war zone, and a rhythm section that moved with both precision and brute force. It was progressive rock, yes, but it carried the sheer sonic weight of hard rock before the term had fully settled in. Robert Fripp's guitar tone was sharp and cutting, almost metallic, while Greg Lake's bass lines anchored the chaos with a thunderous low end. The song's instrumental break, a whirlwind of rapid-fire time changes and syncopated bursts, was unlike anything listeners had heard in 1969. It felt dangerous, cerebral, and relentless all at once. For those who first dropped the needle on it back then, it was a shock to the system. One moment you were in familiar blues rock territory. The next you were thrown into a dizzying musical vortex. It demanded your attention. No casual listening allowed. Its lyrics painted a bleak, almost dystopian vision, echoing the unrest of the late 60s. Yet despite its complexity, the track's raw heaviness made it resonate with fans of both progressive experimentation and hard rock grit. 21st Century Schizoid Man wasn't just ahead of its time, it was decades ahead, foreshadowing the aggression and intensity that metal and heavier rock would embrace. It proved that sophistication and sheer volume could coexist, and in doing so, it carved out a permanent place in hard rock's origin story. When Dazed and Confused emerged on Led Zeppelin's debut album, it wasn't just another blues-inspired track. It was a descent into something darker, heavier, and more atmospheric than anything the band's peers were attempting. Jimmy Page's ominous bass-driven riff set the mood immediately, and the song unfolded like a slow-burn storm gathering on the horizon. The arrangement was a masterclass in tension and release. John Paul Jones's bass lines crept like shadows, while John Bonham's drumming rumbled with controlled menace. Robert Plant's vocals shifted from a low, haunting whisper to an unrestrained wail, mirroring the track's gradual climb into chaos. Then came the middle section, the moment every listener remembers. Page drew a violin bow across his guitar strings, creating eerie, wailing tones that felt almost supernatural. In a dimly lit room with the volume up, it could send chills down your spine. Live, this section often stretched for minutes, turning the song into a psychedelic hard rock ritual. For many fans, hearing Dazed and Confused for the first time was transformative. It wasn't background music, it was an experience. You listened with the lights low, letting every note pull you deeper, until the final explosive return of the main riff snapped you back to reality. In hard rock's evolution, Dazed and Confused proved that heaviness wasn't just about speed or volume. It could also come from atmosphere, mood, and the slow, deliberate build of musical tension. It was Led Zeppelin showing the world just how deep rock could go.
I can't get your love, I can't get affection.
Psychotic Reaction wasn't born in a high-end studio or crafted by veteran rock stars. It came from a group of San Jose high school kids with more energy than resources. Yet this scrappy garage rock anthem hit with a rawness that rivaled anything on the airwaves in 1966. The song opens with a jagged, fuzz-drenched riff that barely holds itself together before diving into a breakneck beat that feels just on the edge of chaos. The verses are tight and urgent, but then comes the breakdown, an almost psychedelic detour of feedback and echo that gave the track a wild, unpredictable edge. For teenagers back then, Psychotic Reaction felt like a burst of adrenaline. You could imagine it rattling the walls of suburban garages during band practice or blasting from AM radios on a hot summer night. It was fast, unpolished, and unapologetically loud, exactly what Restless Youth wanted. Despite being released on the small Double Shot label, the single roared into the Billboard Top 5, proving that you didn't need a big budget to make a big impact. Its blend of garage grit and proto-psychedelic experimentation made it a direct ancestor of both punk and hard rock. Psychotic Reaction is proof that sometimes the most influential moments in rock history come from pure, unfiltered passion. It was the sound of kids picking up instruments and pushing them to their limits, and in the process, helping shape the future of rock's harder, heavier edge.
I know that you have, 'cause there's magic in my eyes.
By 1967, The Who were already masters of volume and attitude. But I Can See for Miles took their precision and power to another level. Pete Townshend called it the heaviest song they'd recorded up to that point, and it's easy to hear why. The guitar is sharp and biting, the bass steady and forceful, and Keith Moon's drumming, relentless, rolling, and unpredictable, pushes the song with unstoppable momentum. Unlike the chaos of My Generation, this track channels its energy into tight control. Every crash, every chord, every sneering vocal from Roger Daltrey lands exactly where it needs to. There's an almost eerie sense of focus, like the band knew they were crafting something built to last. For listeners in the late 60s, it was a reminder that heaviness wasn't just about distortion or speed. It could come from precision, from locking every element into a single, driving force. You could hear it blasting from bedroom turntables, its echo filling the halls, or blaring from transistor radios, cutting through the pop and psychedelia of the day. While it didn't top the charts as expected, its legacy grew with time. Musicians and fans alike recognized it as a blueprint for hard rock's discipline, proof that raw power could be refined without losing impact. I Can See for Miles stands as one of The Who's most enduring statements. Tight, fearless, and impossible to ignore. In the story of hard rock's birth, it's the exclamation point that closed the decade. And there you have it. 15 groundbreaking tracks that lit the fuse for hard rock's roaring rise. These weren't just songs, they were statements, turning up the volume on a generation's defiance, dreams, and restless spirit. Their riffs still rumble, their energy still inspires, and their influence echoes through every power chord that's come since. Which of these takes you back the most? Drop your memories in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. If you enjoyed the trip, like, share, and subscribe for more rock history deep dives. Until next time, keep the vinyl spinning.